أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل الحمد لله وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى الله خير أما يشركون أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة ما كان لكم أن تنبتوا شجرها أإله مع الله بل هم قوم يعدلون أمن جعل الأرض قرارا وجعل خلالها أنهارا وجعل لها رواسي وجعل بين البحرين حاجزا أإله مع الله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض أإله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون أمن يهديكم في ظلمات البر والبحر ومن يرسل الرياح بشرا بين يدي رحمته أإله مع الله تعالى الله عما يشركون أمن يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ومن يرزقكم من السماء والأرض أإله مع الله قل هاتوا برهانكم إن كنتم صادقين.
What is this room called?
Michael Theatre?
The George Michael Theatre. The Bob Mitchell Theatre. Okay, this is the Bob Mitchell Theatre, right? Now imagine, I want you to really imagine that you wake up in this theatre, the doors are closed, you can't get out. And you're seeing people just doing the day-to-day activity. What are you going to say? Surely you're going to say, how did I get into this room? Where am I going?
Someone farted.
It happens to all human beings, bro. Don't point the finger as if you don't fart, okay? It happens to everybody, alright? So you don't have to say that. You don't have to interrupt my flow, okay? Good. Right, now let's get back to maturity, yeah? Good. So, you're in this room and you wake up and what do? Do you join people just doing the day-to-day activity, or do you question, how did I get here? What am I supposed to do? Where am I going? How am I going to get out? If I do get out, what's going to happen to me? And this is exactly why a lot of human beings in this world, in this global village that we live in, they ask these very questions. Some people don't always agree concerning the answers. But I'm here to speak about Islam, and essentially from an Islamic perspective, we believe that Islam, in order to follow it, you have to have good reasons to believe in it. Because maybe unlike other spiritual traditions, Islam really emphasizes on the intellect. Now, this is why the Quran, which is the book of the Muslims, says things like, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not use your brain? Do you not use your intellect? It doesn't tell you just believe because your parents are Muslim. It doesn't say just believe because your parents are Christian. It doesn't just believe just because you happen to be born in England, therefore you have to be a product of this society. The Quran is very existential. It's a very big word, but what it means is, it tries to make you think about yourself. Who am I? Why am I? For whose am I? And where am I? For some of us, yeah? So the point is, this is what the Quran says, are you going to follow your forefathers, even if the thing they were upon was baseless, irrational? So, from an Islamic perspective, the Quran, which is the book of the Muslims, always wants to agitate your thinking. For instance, it says, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? Do they not reflect? أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Didn't you see the camel, the animals, creation and how we created it? وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus to explain our signs in the universe in detail for those who reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So the Islamic message is for people who reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ in the Arabic language is quite a profound term, because it means the thing that you're reflecting upon, you must really think deeply about that thing. Don't be a poet or a desert romantic just touching the sand and looking at the stars and drinking a pint of milk. Just to make it Islamic, yeah? The thing that you're reflecting upon, you must inquire deeply about its implications. What does it mean that we have a consciousness? What does it mean that there was a beginning to the universe? What does it mean that this whole universe is going to end one day? It's going to suffer heat death, according to the physicists and cosmologists. You know, these things have implications and meaning. So from this perspective, we approach the question of why anything in an intellectual manner, in a way that not only agrees with the mind, but it gives the heart tranquility. Because you can't just be too hearty, as they say, because it's irrational. Because if you just base things on your inner whims and desires and just your heartful inclinations blindly, then that could lead you down a very dark place. If you just over-rationalize things, and everything is very cold and abstract, then you can't connect with human beings. So you bring them both together. And this is why the Quran really wants to agitate your thinking and says, do you not see, do you not reflect? For those who reflect. So, in trying to answer the question why Islam, we have to use the Quranic paradigm, the Quranic method of thinking, which is use your brain, aql, intellect. So, we could really summarize why Islam in three ways. God does exist, which is universal to most monotheistic traditions. The Quran is divine, and the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, is a prophet. And you could articulate this in about 15 minutes. We could give 5 minutes in each one. For instance, God's existence. It's so easy. You know, the philosophers have been debating about this for like thousands of years. But I think it's so easy. And let's really think about this. There is a consensus in cosmology that the universe began. Okay? It began. It popped into existence. It was given birth to. It once wasn't here, and then it became here. We don't believe in the steady state theory anymore. When you learn this in science, I'm assuming you have science at this college, you'll be talking about the Big Bang Theory. And if you go deeper into university in academia, you find out the Big Bang Theory is actually not just one theory, but it's various models. For example, you have the Friedman-Lemaitre model, you have the oscillating model, the quantum fluctuation model, and various other models. But the strongest model that many cosmologists, such as Alexander Vilenkin, a Russian scientist, even the atheist Professor Krauss, they're concluding that, you know what, the universe has a boundary, like an apex of a cone, and there's a space-time boundary, meaning t, time, is equal to 0. So the universe popped into existence. The question now is, if we apply this Quranic method of thinking, if the universe began, then there are only a few possible explanations. There are 4 possible explanations. If the universe began, which we can substantiate, there are 4 possible explanations. And you know what's interesting? The Quran gives the answer, actually gives the questions. In chapter 52, verse 35 to 36, it gives us 4 principles for things that begin to exist, just like the universe. Number 1, came from nothing. Number 2, created itself. Number 3, it was created by something else created. Number 4, created by something uncreated. Well, let's take the first option. Can anything that begins to exist come from nothing? This is an impossibility, because take it mathematically. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is equal to? Yeah. What about 0 minus 0 minus 0 minus 0 minus 0 is equal to? Well, 0 divided by 0 divided by 0 divided by 0 is equal to? Yeah. So whatever you do with nothing, you still get nothing. So it's even a logical impossibility from a state of nothing to have something. What I mean by nothing is, if the universe started, it began, it must mean that it once wasn't here. It was in a state of nothingness. So how can something be once nothing, then become something just out of nowhere? This is an intuitive, it's irrational even to claim such a thing. So we know it couldn't come from nothing. What about, could it create itself? Well, this is again a paradox, isn't it? Because for something to create itself, it would mean it was in existence and not in existence at the same time. And that's impossible. For example, can your mother give birth to herself? Messy thought. But the point is, it's an impossibility, right? So the first 2 options are not options. Let's take the third option. What maybe was created by something else created. Like, if I'm created, I can create a chair. But is that an ultimate explanation? No. Because if this universe was as a result of something else created, like another universe, then that universe must have been created. And if that universe was created, then what created that universe? And if that universe was created, then what created that universe? And if that universe was created, then what created that universe? And if that universe was created, then what created that universe? The point is, if you go on forever, you have an infinite regress of acts of creation, you would never have the universe in the first place. The ultimate answer is, it must be uncreated. Because if it goes on forever, you would never have the universe. We wouldn't be here to talk about this. This is where the classical theologian and philosopher Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, if we had an infinite chain of creators, we would never have existence. You'd have non-existence. Let me give you an example to really understand this. Say I want to shake this really cool young man's hand, right? Yeah? He does look cool, doesn't he? Yeah? But in order for me to shake his hand, I have to ask her permission. But she's a bit jealous. Right? She says, no, I'm more cool. But she has to ask permission as well, in order to gain permission, to give him permission. If that goes on forever, am I ever going to shake his hand? No. Exactly. So the ultimate answer is that the universe must have been created by something uncreated. Because we know it couldn't come from nothing, we know it couldn't create itself, we know it couldn't be explained ultimately by being created by something else created. Therefore, the 4th option is the most rational. It was created by something uncreated. Doesn't mean it's God. But when we keep on reflecting, it must be powerful, create the universe, must be knowing, create laws in the universe. And then we come to the conclusion that it's the divine. That doesn't mean Islam is true, it just means God exists. But then we move forward to the next step, which is revelation. Because we believe as human beings that, look, when we create something like a mobile phone, like an iPhone, what do we have inside?
Temple Run.
No, not inside the phone, inside the box. A manual, right? Now you may think, I'm an expert, I could do this trial and error by myself. But there's a few issues here. First, you'll have to learn things the hard way. Secondly, you will never be able to use all of the good features of the phone. There'll be some things that you've missed out. So the point is, life is similar, right? Life is far more complex than an iPhone. So are we saying the divine reality wouldn't give us some kind of message? I think revelation makes sense. Like we're knocking on the door. We know that there's something behind the door, but in order for him to tell us who he is, it must come externally. We can't make our own mind up on who God is. We'll have 6 billion different versions of God. That's why human beings have invented 3,800 names since 6,000 BC Sumeria on who God is. We have nearly 4,000 names for God. God knows. So the point is, it's more rational to conclude that there's an external revelation. And I think there must be 3 criteria to assess if it's revelation. Not blind faith. This is rational thinking. You're all rational human beings in college. Number 1, it has to have a logical view on God. If it says God is, for example, an elephant with 12 arms, and he's green, he's got tattoos on his face, there's a bit of a problem. Why? Because you think God is made up of stuff that we're made of. But if something creates something, it has to be distinct from that thing. If I make this lectern, do I become the lectern? No, I'm not part of the lectern. If I'm Bob the Builder, I make this building, do I become part of the building? No. So just like the creator, he's going to be... It takes long to register. Must be the hijab, because the hair... I'm only kidding, Now I'm not going to stop now, you see. Is that a mouse? Now there you go, make them stop. Right, so it has to be distinct, right? So it has to have the logical view on God. Number 2, it must be consistent. This book can't tell you that the world is flat. Then you can't say it's from the divine, because we know there are some realities that we know are true, such as the roundness of the earth. Number 3, most importantly, number 3, must have a miracle. Must have a miracle. And we know from the Islamic perspective that the Quran actually challenges the whole of mankind concerning its authenticity and its authorship. In the 2nd chapter, 23rd verse, the Quran says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Which basically means, if you doubt this book, we have sent down to this person, Muhammad, upon him be peace, then bring one chapter like it. And we know this formed the linguistic miracle of the Quran, the historical miracle of the Quran, and many other miracles. And what do we mean by miracle? What we mean by miracle is not breaking natural law. That's just a pattern. Maybe we didn't see the pattern properly. What we mean by miracle is that it's an act of impossibility. We can't explain it naturally. And the Quran cannot be explained naturally. I'll give you one. There are many miracles, we don't have time. Let me just give you one. It's a historical one. The Quran mentions 2 different titles for the leader of the Egyptians. Pharaoh, Fir'aun in Arabic, and King, Malik in Arabic. Interestingly, it's for 2 different periods. Pharaoh at the time of Moses, Malik, king at the time of Yusuf, Joseph. 2 distinct periods. Because Moses was in the new kingdom of Egyptian history, and King Malik was in the old Middle Kingdom. The Bible just mentions Pharaoh. The Torah just mentions Pharaoh. The historians at the time, 1400 years ago, just mentioned Pharaoh. Hieroglyphs, the pictorial language of the Egyptians, so we could read their history, was a dead language. No one knew it. So for many years, people thought the Quran was wrong. Why does it have 2 different titles for 2 different periods? But in the 19th century, we discovered the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone was this thing that allowed you to decode the hieroglyphs. And what did we find? We find in actual fact the Quran was right. Because in the old Middle Kingdom, at the time of Joseph, he was never called Pharaoh, he was called the king, Malik. And only at the time of the New Kingdom, at the time of Moses, according to the hieroglyphs, he was called Pharaoh, which I believe means the great house. So where did he get this information from? Because all the other scriptures just mention Pharaoh. The historians just mention Pharaoh. He had no access to hieroglyphs, So we can't explain this small piece of knowledge naturally. So it's an act of impossibility. Therefore it's a miracle. Therefore it's from the divine. And that's one piece of evidence. There's many, many more, including linguistic, scientific, etc. So there's the Quran. And what's interesting with the Quran, it actually answers the biggest questions, like why we're here in the first place. And the Quran says, إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, except to worship God. Now worship God doesn't mean headbutting the floor 5 times a day. Okay? Worship is comprehensive. You know what it is? It actually means don't be a slave anymore. Because I'll guarantee that every single person in this room is a slave. Even myself. You're all slaves. You are slaves. Let me tell you why. What's your name, bro? Omar. Where are you from?
Eritrea.
You're Eritrean, yeah? Did you choose that you were going to be black?
No.
You had no choice in that, right?
No.
Did you choose you're going to be Eritrean?
No.
Okay. Where are you from?
Somali.
Did you choose you're going to be Somali?
No.
Did you choose you're going to be a woman?
No.
Okay. I didn't choose I was going to be Greek. That looks Pakistani. I had no choice in that, right? I had no choice. So we're enslaved to our context. We could never change it. We're enslaved to that. Second point. Many of us were enslaved to our carnal desires and instincts. We just live life almost in an animalistic kind of way. I want to eat, I just eat, regardless what food it is. I want to procreate, I procreate, regardless in what way. I want to, I have a survival instinct, so I'm going to, the rude boy, you know what I'm saying? I'm from Hackney, yeah? So that's how we used to talk. I want the boy. Yeah? We used to be like that, yeah? We used to be the rude boys. Hackney's in the 80s was nothing like, what's this place called? Bradbury, yeah? Bradbury. This place is posh compared to where I came from, yeah? So the point I'm trying to say is, sometimes we are enslaved to what we want to do, just our limited perspectives and desires. Another type of slavery is that we do things just because society said so. Isn't that right, sisters?
Yeah.
L'Oreal, because I'm worth it. We're enslaved to the media hype. We're enslaved to the magazines. Even the way you look. You know this guy here, right? He's been talking to that guy during my presentation, so I'm going to expose it now. This guy here, right? He probably just looks like that because he thinks other people like it. But it's true though. He's not going to walk naked here, is he? He's not going to come here with some green leaves around his chest. So the point is, in a way, he's enslaved to social pressure because he's only looking the way he looks, only because of other people. That's peer pressure. If you I study psychology at university and you have something called the social norm. A social norm is created in various societies and you conform to it because every human being wants to feel certain. I'm not saying, change the way you look. What I'm trying to show is that we have all these different aspects of slavery. And what Islam says, when you enslave yourself to God, then you're free. Because God knows you better than you know yourself. Think about that one. God knows Hamza better than Hamza knows Hamza. So why am I going to be enslaved to my desires, enslaved to social pressure, enslaved to peer pressure, and enslaved to my context? If you truly want to be free, then enslave yourself to the divine reality, because He knows you better than you know yourself. It's like we have all these slave masters, teachers, parents, school, peer pressure, this, that, the other, and God is saying, I'm really your master, your Lord. And I want best for you. These guys, they want best for you, but in a limited way. And that's the freedom of the Quran from that perspective. So, and the last point now is the Prophet Muhammad. So we've justified 2 of the 3 intellectual pillars of Islam. God's existence, the Quranic miracle, and now let's end with the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. He had a claim. His claim was, I am the messenger of God. That's what he said. How do you assess his claim? He either was lying, crazy, deluded, or speaking the truth. But we know he couldn't be lying because his life doesn't reflect the psychological profile of a liar. Isn't it? If we know his life, we read the history books, we see that he sacrificed everything just for La ilaha illallah. There is no deity worthy of worship but the deity, Allah. And if you're Christian, you read Aramaic, you would say Allah. This word is not an alien word coming from the Arabs, okay? It's in the Christian tradition as well. And he sacrificed everything. His companions were tortured and killed. He was starving. He was boycotted. He was stoned by children in a town for hours just for this message. He gained nothing. He was actually even offered riches and power and money. And he rejected all of it just for this simple message. So how could he be loved? It doesn't fit the psychological profile of a liar. Well, maybe he was crazy, deluded. Maybe he thinks he was speaking the truth, but it was based on a lie. We know this is not true because look at his teachings. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. You won't be a true believer unless you love for others what you love for yourself. اتقوا الظلم فإن الظلم ظلمات يوم القيامة. Be conscious of injustice and oppression, for it's going to be darkness on the day of judgment. There is no harming and no reciprocating of harm. If you don't show mercy, mercy won't be shown on you. So you have all these things. Is this the product of a madman? We may think, well, it was an accident. But let me give you something. In his whole life, he had various instances that he could have used to justify his delusion. You know, some people who are a bit crazy and deluded, you know, you get sisters like that sometimes, yeah? He really likes me. Because, you know, he was twitching when he walked past me. And, you know, it's nothing to do with Tourette's. It must be, you know? You know, we go with this crazy fantasies sometimes, yeah? Even brothers are like that too, yeah? So listen to this. You know, the Prophet, upon him, could be like, oh yes, this happened because I must be a prophet. But he never did that. For example, when his son passed away, Ibrahim, at young age, there was an eclipse. All the Arabs said, this eclipse is because of your son passing away. If he was deluded, he would have used this and many other instances to say, yes, it's because I am a prophet. But he didn't say no. He said the eclipse happens for no one's death. So you can't say he's deluded. So he must have been speaking the truth. And I would argue to reject Muhammad, upon him be peace, as a prophet is the equivalent of rejecting your own mother. Mama, your mother's alive? Alhamdulillah. I want you to prove to me that your mother is your mother.
That my mother's my mother?
Yeah. You got 90 seconds. Okay. Think first.
Hardcore
Hardcore evidence, yeah?
Hardcore evidence.
Yeah. Prove to
If
me.
you jump in my time machine, we can go back.
We don't have a time machine, bro.
Pictures, that's all I can say. And even pictures is open to.
Yes, it is.
No?
That's why think first. Think. You got 90 seconds.
Okay.
I want everybody else to think about their own mother as well. Okay, guys, listen. Okay, guys, listen. Right. Give me your answer.
I said there's all of it is circumstantial. The closest I can get is birth certificate, pictures, and my mother's testimony.
Excellent.
So she's my mother.
Excellent. So, what you've just given me is his testimony. Okay? A picture is pictorial testimony. Birth certificate is also written testimony, and her word is testimony. So you just got 3 pieces of testimony. Who your father is? Maybe. Yeah. 4 pieces of testimony. Midwife. Say 5. So we got 5 pieces of testimony that your mother is probably your mother. And that goes for everybody. You have no proof. You just have these testimony which could constitute proof, and it can. But the point is fine. She is your mother. But you know, if you reject Muhammad upon him peace, you reject your mother. Because do you know how many forms of testimony we have? 10,000. We have 10,000 companions of the Prophet Muhammad with biographical data. You tell me 5 key people of Obama.
5 key people of Obama.
Name me them. Name me 5 people of Gandhi that we know that are famous. Name me even 5 people of Jesus. Don't say the disciples, because we don't even know the second name. Sorry.
Obama is Robert Gates, Brzezinski, Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
The devil.
Okay, now I want you to tell me the date of birth. If they're trustworthy, biographical data, you don't know. No? Exactly. We have 10,000 documented pieces of evidence for every single narrator of testimony concerning the prophethood of Muhammad upon him be peace, and that he would exist in his life. 10,000. So 5 and 10,000. What would the wise men do? Take 10,000. So, and if you don't, it's equivalent of rejecting your own mother. So let me summarize the lecture. We start off by saying if we were born in this room or we woke up in this room and everything's closed, we're going to ask the right questions. What am I doing here? Where am I going? What's going to happen to me after this room? We talked about the Quranic method of thinking, which is not to be blind faith and follow your forefathers, to use your intellect and your mind. And we talked about God's existence. The universe, for example, it couldn't be popped into existence out of nothing, couldn't create itself, couldn't be created by something else created, must have been created by something uncreated. And then we talked about the Quran. It has an intellectual challenge to the whole of mankind. We talked about the criteria of revelation, which is must have a logical view of God, must be consistent, and it must have a miracle. And we talked about some of the miracles, the historic one, but there are many others. Then we talked about the message of the Quran, which was to truly free you from your ego, from your context and social pressure. And also, we talked about the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace. He couldn't be a liar, couldn't be deluded, he must have been speaking the truth. So these are good intellectual reasons of why Islam. Thank you very much for listening.
One of the questions are that what are the rights of women in Islam?
They don't have no rights. They just have lots of wrongs. Why are you kidding? Why are you kidding? Okay, let's just be very real here, right? Now, we know when we talk to the wider society as Muslims or non-Muslims, we need to really be truthful and engage with them in a positive way. So, the reality is that although all human beings are considered equal in Islam, regardless of gender and ethnicity and religion, the point is, there are differences. I studied psychology, and one of my professors was Professor Groom. And he basically wrote this book called Individual Differences. I think it was him, yeah, Individual Differences. And in that, there are positive correlations of gender differences in society. We're not the same. Whether you want it or not, just get over that, yeah? That's political bakwas. Yeah? Which also means rubbish. Yeah? It doesn't make sense. If we to claim that is irrational. You know, let's just be real as human beings. We are different. Totally. In some aspects. In many aspects we're very similar. But the scientific evidence is that we're different. Now, so therefore the Quran gives us a social model to use those differences in what we call in a perfect way, in a perfect society. So, hence that's why clothing may be different, for instance. Yeah? But coming towards the rights, there are some rights in Islam that women have far more rights than men. For example, women don't have to pay for their own education, they don't have to pay for their own clothes, their own shelter, even their own makeup. Yeah. If the father can't afford it, the state has to give it. It's a state obligation in the Islamic paradigm. So there's some of the rights. We have rights concerning education. It's an obligation to provide education to women. We also have rights concerning food, shelter, clothing, preserving of dignity and honor. A woman is seen as an honor in society that needs to be protected. Also, in the Islamic paradigm, you may see some laws that you may think is a bit unjust. For example, if you're unmarried as a woman, your brother will get twice inheritance than you. Now you may think, what's going on, God? Yeah? But the point is, we can't be shallow thinkers anymore. Now, let me tell you why. Look at the wisdom. In an Islamic environment, the social model is linked with the economic model. Everything is linked. Now, his twice inheritance still means he's poorer than you. Because that brother has an obligation to ensure that you have food, shelter, and clothing. He has to spend on you. As a woman in Islamic society, you don't have to spend on anybody. Your money is yours. His money is yours. Yeah? Now you may think, well, you know, I want to be a woman, I want to earn my own wage. It's fine. That's your view. But the point is, I'm trying to show that how liberated, like, for example, if you really go to somewhere like Qatar, yeah? Women are queens. They are queens. They're treated like princesses all around the Arab world. Obviously, we still have issues concerning domestic violence and this and that, and not letting to drive, which is not Islamic. That's ridiculous, yeah? But the point is, generally speaking, in a social model perspective, they're treated like queens from that perspective. So, with regards to rights, women could get involved in politics. Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, who was the second caliph of Islam, almost the right-hand man of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, he hired a woman to walk into the marketplace with a stick. So when there was injustice happening on the scales, she would give the men a good beating. She was acting like the police officer of the time, as like the commander of the marketplace. Do you see? So women can get involved politically from that perspective. However, though, the recommended role of a woman is that of a mother. And that's just frank, that's what Islam says. Okay? It doesn't mean she can't work, because the wife of the Prophet Muhammad was a businesswoman. By the way, he works for his wife. I don't think any of you is going to work for your wife, yeah? Even if you have the opportunity. She was a businesswoman, and you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to trade in the marketplace. And in contemporary terms, it could be the trades, the stock market, you could be a banker, whatever the case may be. But the point is, the recommended role is a mother. Because why is that the case? Because look at this society. I was listening to LBC Radio in London, and professional women, when they have small children, they said, regardless of my career, I want to be at home with my kids. There's an amazing book by Lisa Birking. It's called Confessions of a Working Mother. She said, I couldn't give 100%. I couldn't give 100% of myself to my husband. I couldn't give 100% of myself to my children or to my work. So, what it is I think in our society, one of the main reasons why women were actually almost forced socially to go and work is just to get more taxes. I mean, I used to work as a project manager in Tower Hamlets in London, and the social services were designing parents, women, to get back to work straight away within 1 month of childbirth, because they needed that in that particular community. But there are other economic policies now. If you start looking at the Conservative Party, they're saying, you know what, we should start giving women more incentives to stay at home. It's far more better for social harmony and cohesion. It's far more better for education statistically. The stats came out recently. Go to the government statistics. Positive correlation. If you have someone at home, whether it's a male or female, it's far more better for the children and for society at large. It's not a crazy mufti or Osama bin Laden saying this, yeah? It's actually academics. Now, it doesn't mean you're doing children injustice because you're working. It's not your fault, it's the system's fault, because the system has been designed just for consumerism, not for the benefit of humanity at large, in my humble opinion. So this is why that is the central role of a woman in Islam, which we think is the most hardest job, and the hardest role, it's not full-time, it's double-time. Because you're an educator of your children, you're a protector of your children, you are this, you're that, you're everything. I mean, it's phenomenal work. But in a liberal capitalist society, the parent becomes the government. This is why schools were mirrored on prisons. Historically, schools were mirrored on prisons. Do you know that? Just to keep the working class lot in check while everyone was working. The intellectuals used to have tutors. The post-Enlightenment movement, John Locke, all these amazing thinkers in our British history, was as a result of tutoring and also coffee. Because it's from the coffee shops that you had thinking and people used to share ideas. I'm not saying don't go to school now. But what I'm saying is we need to be critical, we need to be human beings, we need to use our minds, and just discuss. I may be wrong, but this is the evidence thus far. And this is a discussion maybe you guys should have you should have debating societies in this college and discuss and have intellectual discourse, not just religious, but political, social, economic. Bring your values in there. Even amongst Muslims, there's so many differences. Bring them out, but discuss them in a human way. And when you do that, you're able to connect with each other in such a profound way. And let me just end on this, because I'm assuming it's stop, yeah? Don't always feel that you have to connect with human beings based upon your commonality. I think that's wrong. Because human beings are going to connect on commonalities anyway. That's the natural thing. But look at the differences, because the differences are the cause for the fear and anxiety. But once you discuss the differences, you show that they're human, they're relevant and real, then that won't be a cause of anxiety anymore. And that's something very important. And you know Bruce Lee? You know Bruce Lee? Famous Kung Fu guy, yeah? The founder of MMA in a way, yeah? He went to America and he had that philosophy. He said, look, there's no point in me coming to America and pretending to be that I'm an American. Fine, I'm a citizen, but there's no point in me emulating the culture to a perspective that I've lost who I am. I want to show them what's different about me. So they don't go and they don't curse the Viet Cong anymore, because in the 60s and 50s there was a war in Vietnam and other places. Yeah, they don't curse the Asians, because Asians in American language means Chinese. Yeah, now they see me as a human being with differences, but relevant differences that are human, unique, cultural, based on an alternative philosophy, but is very profound. And that's what he did. And he had to fight his own people in order to teach people Kung Fu in America. And his story is an amazing story of battling these kind of cultural prejudices within his own culture and outside of his culture. And the way he battled that was, yes, I am different, but you know what? It's human. And you got human differences too. I may disagree with them, but I like them. They're relevant, they're real. We can have a discussion. And then now, those differences are not a cause for anxiety and fear. Thank you very much for your patience, okay?